What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. Larry Rifkin and John Krofsick. And John, you're out of this world. You really
I
are.
am.
Well,
my wife thinks so.
Wow. I thought she thought you were the cat's meow. But you're going to write home, aren't you, E.T., if you are out of this
Phone
world?
home. Yes,
yeah,
that's
we want you to phone, write. Now I guess we should say text
That's
E.T.,
right. Text
right?
home.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, John, to me, the last year, one of the big stories that I think was missed, and when I'm looking at trends, and you know I dive pretty deep looking for stuff that we can really talk about here on America Trends, I think that everybody was so focused and had that insatiable appetite for all things Trump that we missed a really big story.
We missed something out of this world.
Well, we did. No, honest to goodness. I mean, because when you look at Donald Trump in the scope of things, I mean, he will come and he will go.
That's
and
true.
Some say he will be in the pantheon, others the ash heap of history. It really depends. But when you're looking at our relationship with beings all over the galaxy and the universe, now that's a big story. That will supersede and transcend the Trump era, right?
That is a huge story, yes.
And I don't think we really paid enough attention to some of the reports that our government put out toward the end of 2017 about all the work that they have been doing on the relationship to extraterrestrial beings, or at least our inquisitiveness and our, trying to fund and resource some of the work.
Well, I don't know. I think I've heard that on late night radio.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, Art Bell. Now, Art Bell just died,
he
didn't
did.
he?
Yes, he's out of this world.
No, well, he may be communing somewhere. Where was he? Where did he live? In New Mexico or
New Mexico and the Philippines, and then I think he went back to New Mexico.
Was he in near Area 51?
Yeah, maybe he lived there.
Yeah,
Who knows?
perhaps. In his mind, he certainly did. But I do think that there was a lot of reporting toward the end of the year about these government reports of all the work that's been done through many different administrations. And I remember Barack Obama coming on a program saying, "Oh, that's some of the most interesting stuff I have learned since becoming president." But again, the cat isn't really out of the bag. I don't think we really know exactly what it is the government has found, but we certainly have been very interested in finding out.
Well, there's some that say, and I've read, that all the technology we had came from extraterrestrials. So,
Now,
maybe we came from extraterrestrials.
Now, did we have to pay for any of that, or they just gave it to us?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what the deal was.
Who made that deal?
I don't know what they want.
Trump said he made a deal with E.T. But do you believe that we've been visited, I mean, you, John Krofsick, today on this day when we're talking about this?
Well, no. I don't think we've been visited, no.
No?
I don't.
But do you think that given all of the findings recently where we keep finding these exoplanets
I think there's other life out here. If we happen to, hit the lottery and make it on this planet, that I think there's got to be other planets out there that have life on of some type.
Well, recently there was someone who said, well, if we don't get this climate thing right, there isn't really a planet B. But we've also explored with the Space Barons the fact that there are many innovators and entrepreneurs who would love for us to not cast all of our future on this particular planet and look for ways for us to live on other planets.
Well, I think we got to. I think we really do. I mean, our sun, we really don't know much about our sun and how long that's going to last. I mean, there's a lot we don't know. So I think in order maybe for us to survive, might have to go to other planets to find.
Right. So maybe
there.
that's Mars.
Yeah, maybe.
Perhaps. Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of money spent, some brilliant minds applied, and some new discoveries suggesting that we're not alone. And not to give this issue more credence or to, I don't know. I mean, really, I have a really open mind about all of this, but we're going to take it out of Area 51 and Roswell, and we're going to put it right here on America Trends as something to get your telescope out and keep an eye on. And with us today, and I found her to be really interesting, Caroline Cory. And she has been part of the History Channel series Ancient Aliens. She's an author, and for our purposes, John, on this podcast, she has produced and directed a new documentary called E.T. Contact. They Are Here. And I'll tell you, when I saw the trailer and some of the great minds that she has brought to this from very established higher education institutions, to me, that gave me pause. I better continue to think about this issue.
Well, I'm going to have to go home and watch that.
Well, let's take a listen to the trailer.
All right.
This will give us some really good insights into what it is that Caroline has been exploring.
There's quite a few extraterrestrials wandering around, the humanoid ones. So we've got them walking amongst us.
They weren't human at all. These were extraterrestrials standing there examining me in the room.
I thought they were very elegant, about 7 feet tall.
They live aboard their spacecraft, which is sort of in Earth's atmosphere.
They would bring me to the planet and introduce me to other kids my age, and we would play together.
And I asked him if I could hold his hand. I wanted to know what it felt like to touch them. And I wanted to know it was real.
So what you do is you take the experiences that people talk about and you operationalize it.
How is this even possible that higher dimensional energies can be downloaded or brought down into our ordinary 4 dimensions of space-time reality?
The quantum wave, which is the description of all nature, instantaneously propagated the consciousness of the Houston handler to the moon.
This is not an American phenomenon. This is not a Western phenomenon. This is a global phenomenon.
There's not only thousands, there's potentially millions of people out there that are living this double life.
They will lead us into telepathic abilities. They will lead us into abilities to heal ourselves, to literally change our body.
DNA treatment number 2. What's interesting is the actual number, the magnitude of the changes that I've been seeing in the past when energy treats the DNA. This is a robust, strong effect.
There are layers of codes. There's thousands of codes layered on top of each other. You touch one part, it touches 10 other parts.
All of this information is actually following lines. It comes through this multidimensional grid system. This means interdimensional information is going to happen instantly in locations like these.
Human DNA in our body can exist as a tooling to bring in higher dimensional energies into our physical body, convert them into electromagnetic fields, which then the body can use to regulate the physiological and biochemical processes associated with humans.
I believe this is the theory of everything.
Now, she's got some fascinating segments, John, in the film. And these experts come from Harvard and Stanford. So skeptics and true believers gather around as we explore her scientific approach to explain UFOs and other world phenomena. So are you ready, John?
I'm ready.
All right.
Strap yourself in.
Caroline Cory here on America Trend. With us on the line is Caroline Cory. She's a futurist and author of best-selling books on human consciousness, and most pertinent for today's discussion, she's the producer and the director of the documentary E.T. Contact. They Are Here. Now, it's also known as Gods Among Us, the Science of Contact, and the naming of a documentary. How important is that, and what are you trying to convey in the title?
Yeah, actually, the title was Gods Among Us because I had written a book called Gods Among Us, and for me, this was kind of part of that whole revelation, so to speak. But you know how it goes. Once you have to have it distributed, and the marketing, from the marketing perspective, the distributors did not like so much the title because they were afraid that it would be considered religious or something like that. When you see a title with the word gods, even though it was plural, but that was their thinking. So they said we have to really make it straight to the point. It is about extraterrestrial contact, just call it ET contact, and that's how the new title came about.
Well, for the skeptical who are listening to this podcast, what's the most compelling evidence that we have that we're being visited by extraterrestrial beings?
Actually, there's a lot of evidence. I don't even know where to begin. But in the film, I also have to say that this is really about contact in a wider sense, meaning it's not just about seeing UFOs in the sky and kind of going to government history with, these types of programs that they ran about UFOs and things like that. This is really more about any sort of contact experience that you may have with an otherworldly intelligence, or, for example, there are a lot of folks who have a deceased relative who comes back to them, or they appear in their dreams and they have a very specific message, or a healing is performed, or they start speaking a language that they didn't know. So any sort of contact experience with other worlds, other entities, and of course that would also include, UFO abductions and that sort of experience. So it's really the whole range. And because of that, we had to bring in different types of evidence to support this phenomenon. And one of the most compelling evidence was when Edgar Mitchell, who is the Apollo 14 astronaut, was on his mission on the moon. He conducted an experiment with the folks on the ground, sending a telepathic message, which was in fact received. And that was one sort of evidence, but also I brought in some scientific experiments that we did in the film that also showed that when you come in contact with a being or intelligence, even though you don't see them, even though they're kind of in another dimension, that there is immeasurable physiological change on the DNA, even on a DNA
Yeah,
level.
I found that fascinating. And you brought up Edgar Mitchell. We've had his partner, John White, in the Institute of Noetic Sciences on our podcast in the past. And so there are a lot of scientific types who truly do buy into some of these other noetic activities in the world, and they're scientists. So do you bring a lot of scientists to your conversation?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, people were surprised. The first thing you see as you are watching the film is the number of scientists we're featuring in the film, and especially their credentials. I mean, we have folks from Harvard, Smithsonian, we have from Stanford, from University of California. I mean, this is top-level scientists who dare to think outside the box and who have been really researching the effects of consciousness on physical matter, for example, such as in, like you just mentioned, ions, the Noetic Science Society. And so I wanted to include that portion in the film because, first of all, to me, this is a real phenomenon. I mean, at the end, after having experiences yourself and meeting so many people around the world over and over and over, having confirmation for years and years and years, at one point you have to stop and say, okay, well, this is real. Let's just see if we can bring anything that's measurable to the table. And that's what I attempted to do in the film, and I think we succeeded very well.
Well, there are so many people who are saying this today, so I don't know whether you feel that the company for this kind of information is growing. But I just saw an article in the Hartford Courant because we come from Connecticut. And a retired United Technologies engineer of 33 years recalled a saucer bathed in flickering red and green lights. And then there was an attorney who is reported in this article saying that in 30 years since he was actually seeing things about flying saucers, people have become much more accepting of the UFO phenomenon. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's that is also the reason for the timing of my film. I've been lecturing and teaching about consciousness and energy medicine for a very long time. But I still felt it wasn't the right time to be speaking about it, kind of in the mainstream. When you make a film, you're kind of out in the mainstream. And so, but I felt like in the last few years, people were more open. When you mention things about, consciousness or any sort of contact or ESP experience, before I think most people would be rolling their eyes, and now they'd be like, yeah, I think something like this happened to me, So I think it's much easier to have this conversation nowadays. And it's just like, if you think about it, 20 years ago when I remember I used to mention about yoga and organic foods, and people would be rolling their eyes, like, what is she talking
Oh, absolutely.
about?
I just went to a report at our local library about Akashic records and coming into contact with your soul. And there were about 5 men there and lots of women. Women are more receptive, I think, to a lot of this than men, but I think men are beginning to catch on.
Yeah, and in my lectures, there are a lot of men. I'm shocked how they're really open, and especially when you start to bring the science, because then they go, oh, well, there is something that is real here, and they take it more seriously. So these are exciting times. Like you said, I think people are more open and ready, for sure.
Well, I think they want to escape some of the realities that they see, and so they're looking for new realities. But let me ask you, you mentioned about the government, and they have been involved in studies year after year after year. And I thought it was buried at the end of 2017, that recently revealed formerly secret U.S. government program that studied unexplained aerial phenomena. I don't think it got the attention at the end of 2017 that it deserved. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was a huge step in the right direction. I mean, it did make it on the New York Times, right, and some of the major televisions. So, but you're right. Maybe it wasn't sustained, if that's what you mean. It kind of was in the mainstream, but short-lived. And so perhaps that is the beginning of more similar disclosures. I hope so. But that's the reason why, a lot of us are making these films now and just being out in the open and speaking about it, because I'm not sure how much the government is going to do. They're going to do it according to their own agenda and, program.
Well, they've been interested in this since about the 40s with Roswell and the like. But do you think we need any sanctioning, if you will? I mean, when Bill Clinton went on one of those late-night programs and kind of winked, and Barack Obama, too, about the program, I mean, what did that mean to people's curiosity about all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're trying to give us a message without being blunt about it. I think a lot of people just know that the government knows. They've been into it for a very, very long time. And so, but I also feel that they are not disclosing for different reasons. Of course, they say that the people are not ready and this will create chaos or what have you. But I think they also don't understand a lot of it themselves. And just like in any organization, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and you know how that goes. So maybe some folks in the government know what's going on, others don't. And so, it's just not so easy to come out and say, this is what it is, and this is what we've been doing, and, this is how it all works,
We'll return to this episode of America Trends in just a moment. If you like what we're doing here at America Trends Podcast, please don't keep it to yourself. I know there are a lot of people, John, who think, well, if I'm listening and somebody else wants to listen at the same time, maybe we're going to collide and they're not going to be able to hear us.
Yeah.
Is that the way the technology works?
No, there's plenty of bandwidth. Everybody can listen at the same time.
All right. Well, that
sure
dispels that myth. Now, you can do a number of things that would really be helpful to us. You could give us a kind rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, and that boosts what they consider to be our value and visibility. And what does that do, John?
Well, that puts us in the forefront so that you can find us easier, and most important is other people can find us easier.
And you can subscribe there or on our site, americatrendspodcast.com, or wherever you're listening, so we can alert you to new episodes of the podcast, which, by the way, we put out twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or you can like us on Facebook or follow us where, John?
On Twitter.
On Twitter. That's right, where the world turns to hear fake news or whatever it is. Well,
Not
you can
us,
direct
though. We
message
have
us
real news.
at Trends Podcast or using hashtag Trends Podcast. And you know, John, with our growing audience, and really it's been pretty remarkable, a lot of people just came to us the last month or two, and they might have missed earlier episodes. Can they get them again?
They can look through them and pick the ones they want to listen to. They're all on the website, and a lot of them are up on iTunes, many of them.
All right. Well, listen, there's lots of material to listen to. We hope you have the time, and we'll lend it to us because we try to make it worth your while. And thanks so much for listening.
And tell your friends.
We now return to this episode of America Trends.
Are you hoping that a film like yours and a lot of the work that people are doing now in this realm will make it less of a jarring effect like War of the Worlds and fiction was many years ago, if in fact people begin to have these experiences, that they're not going to feel so overwhelmed by them or so panicked?
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely the reason why I decided to put it out there and put myself out there. You know, as I started to mention that I've had the experiences myself as a child. So I know this is a real phenomenon. It took me a long time to kind of understand how it works, how consciousness works, and how you tap into other realities when other people don't. I mean, that whole area, it became my area of expertise, really. And so, but this, I feel like it's enough time that, you know, too many people are having some sort of experience. And so I'm really hoping, like you said, putting this film out there will encourage a lot of people to just relax, you know, with this whole phenomenon and just be more accepting, more open. And the more of people like myself, you know, keep talking about it, I think the easier it will get, for sure.
Should we make people skeptical that there isn't a life force and many things beyond our conscious realm that affect us every day? In other words, when you think about how vast the galaxy is and the universe is, and we begin to explore it and see more of it all the time, shouldn't we become more skeptical of the fact that what we're doing here is so unique, as opposed to being visited by experiences well beyond what we can see or sense at times?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it doesn't even make sense to think that this is it, that whoever created this entire universe with the millions of types of breeds and varieties of, you know, planets and stars and, you know, and animals and, you know, and then the human species was created and that's it. I mean, it just doesn't even make sense. And even mathematically, you know, the Drake equation tells you it's even impossible that there would not be other types of species inhabiting the universe. So to me, like you said, it doesn't even make sense to keep thinking that way. I think it's really out of fear. And also, you know, there's more and more scientific evidence that this is more real than the other way around, you know. So, yeah, I'm very hopeful. I think this is the right time. And perhaps, like you're saying, maybe in a strange way, people are becoming more open, just because the old paradigm explanations, if you will, the old paradigm way of thinking doesn't even work anymore. It doesn't even make sense, you know?
Yeah, Caroline Cory is with us, producer and director of E.T. Contact. They are here. And Caroline, go back and inform us as to what it was that you experienced. And then let's talk about some of the people that you focus on in your film.
Yeah, so for me, the most significant experience happened at the age of 5. I was just kind of minding my own business as a child, and all of a sudden there was this kind of a group of light beings that showed up. It really felt more like a pulsating light. And what happened is I noticed that I could see it, sense it, and merge with it. Kind of, I felt like I became one with it. And all of a sudden, there was a communication that happened. There was telepathic communication that went back and forth. And in that instant, I could understand everything they were saying. They could hear me. I could hear them. I wasn't speaking out loud, so obviously I was communicating telepathically. And so I realized at that time that I could not only perceive solar energy, but that your brain functions differently. When you are tapping into another intelligence, so to speak, your brain is in the experience. You're one with it, so there's no separation. They don't have to tell you, hey, we are from this place, and this is who we are, and this is what we're doing. You kind of know everything about them, and they know everything about you. And so this was a very significant experience because it felt very familiar. It felt very comfortable. And these beings kind of told me that we are connected. Everybody's connected to their own lineage, so to speak, even when they are here in a human body. And this connection is never severed. It just doesn't stop, and we are meant to continue this communication throughout my life. And they showed me how this telepathic exchange was happening. It's kind of like codes, that go, universal codes that go back and forth between them and myself. I could see that transfer. And they said, if you want to communicate, this is how, focus on this is how it works. So you can imagine how significant this experience was. But I didn't make anything out of it. I didn't think it was such a big deal. You're 5 years old. You don't know. I mean, you think, oh, well, maybe other 5-year-olds, have similar experiences. You don't think anything until you grow up, and then you continue having different types of experiences. And this is where I realized, okay, what happened there, and how did it work, and how does consciousness work, and how within the framework of this reality, how is it possible that certain beings could receive signals that others can't? And so that got me into the whole world of consciousness and quantum mechanics and that sort of thing, and healing as well, energetic healing, for a very long time. So that I was lecturing and teaching, and I wrote books about it. Until more recently, I decided to share these experiences through the film. And of course, along the way, I met so many people around the world, and researchers and hypnotherapists, of course, who had come in contact with so many people who had similar experiences. And like I said, it ranged from an experience like mine all the way to being on a UFO and having very, very strong, vivid experiences that marked them physiologically. I mean, they came back changed.
Well, what is the difference between someone who may be listening who says, I've never had anything like this, I've been on this mortal plane, and I feel I'm not really surrounded by all this light and all this other energy, as opposed to people like you and many in the film?
I think they are just simply not aware. This is a spontaneous, natural phenomenon. In other words, everybody's exchanging energy with everyone. And in fact, that is the reason why we go to a space. It could be a restaurant, a store, or we're speaking to someone on the phone, and all of a sudden we kind of feel bad or we feel something is off. That feeling is the exchange, the energetic exchange that just happened. It's invisible. That's why you're not aware of it. You don't see these waves, these quantum waves traveling between people. So you assume that there is no connection. However, this is really part of the mechanics of the universe. Everything is interconnected. Energy is interconnected. So I think the folks who are not aware are simply not focusing on it out of fear. I notice a lot of folks that actually come to my classes and lectures, and they say, well, I want to see more. I want to see more beings and things like that. And then when I kind of focus on what's going on, I see that their block is really about fear, because once you tap into that reality and you see, you cannot unsee, if that makes sense.
I understand, totally.
You know?
For how many people, as a percentage, would you say this involves a physical manifestation of some other worldly being versus an energy?
I think most people are coming in contact with more energy. In other words, the beings are there, but it's more an interdimensional experience. So they can sense their presence, but they couldn't physically touch them, let's say. So most people are like that, I would say.
You introduced, by the way, the concept of the hybrid. Is that what you were saying earlier when you suggested that once you've come into contact, your whole sense of being takes on a different dimension?
Yes, absolutely. So the hybridization program is a whole, very, very important topic, and it's happening on different levels. So there's genetic engineering that's happening all the time. I mean, humans are manipulating genes all the time, but it's mostly for the purpose of health. They're changing the genes, bumping up this one, taking out that one, to supposedly create a healthier human. However, what I introduced in the film, and also there's Russian scientists who are working on this, it's called wave genetics, where the genes could actually change, be modulated without having any physical interference, meaning as I'm coming in contact with you, I am literally affecting, modulating your genes, even at a DNA level. Think about that. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So these Russian scientists are actually demonstrating under a laboratory condition how the genes of, I think it was a frog, is actually literally transferring into another biological system without any physical connection of the two, between the two. And so that is the experiment actually that we conducted in the film. We took a DNA sample and we kind of brought in and tried to kind of change it, modulate it under laboratory condition as we invoke an invisible entity, which was an archangel at the time. And we were able to demonstrate scientifically that you can affect the electrical conductivity and the frequency of the actual DNA sample under laboratory condition. An invisible force can actually change your DNA literally.
Wow, that is remarkable. Yeah. And people will have to see the film. But you interview several individuals who claim to have regular contact with extraterrestrial beings. Why don't you give us a story or two before we leave the podcast today? And again, there are certain people out there still trying to get their arms around all of this, as you can imagine. So help us with that in the clearest way you can to describe what the film will show.
Yeah, so I also wanted to include stories that they were quite diversified, but as compelling and credible as possible. And so I found, for example, one of the stories was a young gentleman. He's 19 years old, and just the way he spoke, and people will hopefully be able to hear or see him on film. You could just tell that he was just so wise. And I'm not talking about intelligence like a straight A kind of kid, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that you could tell that he was understanding the mechanics of the whole universe in every word he said, you know. His energy was amazing, and he was sharing his experiences when he would come in contact with these beings. In one of the instances, he suddenly started to speak a language that he had never spoken or heard of before, and so he started to speak that language and write in a language that he didn't know before. So his story, and him being so young, it just I just think his story is very, very compelling and really amazing to listen to. Another person that we had in the film is pretty kind of also out there, but very, very compelling. And this is Cynthia Crawford in the film. She actually was born as a twin. She was born without an amniotic sac when her twin sister had an amniotic sac. They were supposed to be twins, but actually they did not share the same blood type. They did not share any tissue type, and so on and so forth. Throughout her life, she had all sorts of physical and physiological anomalies in her body that the doctors would discover. And so her story I thought was very, very powerful. And she told us that this happened because her father told her that when he was in the Air Force, the government made a deal with him, or he agreed anyway, to be part of this genetic hybridization program. So in other words, in exchange for some position in Korea at the time or something like that. And so there's plenty of physical evidence in this story as well. And I think people will be blown away when they see it unfold in the film. So
Where can they see the film, Caroline?
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime for those who have Amazon Prime. And they can also go to the website, et-contact.com, and they can see all the different platforms it's available on, for example, iTunes and Vimeo and, in different territories. So
okay, well,
it sounds online. Yeah.
Sounds fascinating. ET Contact, they are here. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us today on America Trends, and we know a lot of people are going to take a look as a result.
I hope so. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
There's quite a few extraterrestrials wandering around, the humanoid ones, that you may not know that you just think they look nice people or whatever, or they just feel a bit different to you. So we've got them walking amongst us.
All of a sudden I felt someone lying behind me, and my eyes flew open, and I saw and felt what were clearly non-human arms holding me around my waist.
They're taller than me, and they're very thin. Very thin. Arms, legs, head is big. The back of the skull is very pronounced.
These things do happen to people and are significant, but the contact experience that's so widely reported, yet controversial still, is part of an even bigger picture.
I did meet these people from the constellation Orion.
You want to know what your DNA is. You're 34% human, 28% white, tall white Zeta, and 38% Anunnaki.
DNA treatment number 2. What's interesting is the actual number, the magnitude of the changes that I've been seeing in the past when energy treats the DNA. This is a robust, strong effect.
There's extraterrestrials in front of me. There's different extraterrestrials in the room. It was very overwhelming. It was a sensory overload.
And he said, this is one of my prized coils. And he said, do you know who I am? And I said, no. And then he said, my name is Nikola Tesla.
Our physical capacity extends beyond the skin, energetically and non-locally with our conscious intention.
Are you communicating with them?
They're communicating with me.
What are they saying? All of this information is actually following lines. It comes through this multidimensional grid system. This means interdimensional information is going to happen instantly in locations like these.
Human DNA in our body can exist as a toroid to bring in higher dimensional energies into our physical body, convert them into electromagnetic fields, which then the body can use to regulate the physiological and biochemical processes associated with healing.